Good morning. Today we look at Joseph 16 through 18, and this is more of the distribution of the land amongst the tribes of Israel. They've been in the promised land for a while. Joshua has become an elderly man, and it's time, he says, and God says, that the people should take possession of all of the land. And we kind of started a little bit of that, yesterday as we talked about, and today it's the allotment for the Josephites. Those are the offspring of Joseph, and they talked about what they received, and then the Josephites are Manasseh and Ephraim, received their allowance, and the territory of the Ephraimites, and so it's just like the SON or SEN and stuff that gets added to a lot of our names. They're, to define, your heritage, your parentage that way. And so we find that the land being given out and the boundaries set. And yesterday I had those maps that I showed. And as I look at those maps in that other Bible, I still can't really make out exactly where things are on there, and I suppose if I studied them for quite a while maybe I could, but it's really a moot point in so much. And then chapter 17 starts out with the land given to the tribe of Manasseh, who was the firstborn of Joseph, and they end up splitting into two tribes, so they end up getting two different places that they go. And so there's quite a bit of talk about them. And then in verse 14 it says, the tribe of Joseph spoke to Joshua, saying, why have you only given us one lot? We are such a numerous people. We need more land. And so then they end up getting more land because they are such a large group. But verse 16 it says, the tribe of Joseph said, the hill country is not enough for us. Yet all the Canaanites who live in the plain have chariots of iron, both in Bethshem and the villages, and those in the valley of Jezreel. And so they're afraid of the people that are living there. And they seem to have already forgotten that God says, I will go with you, and I will defeat those in the land for you, and you will take possession of the land. And Joshua reminds them of that. He says, you indeed are a numerous people and have great power. You shall not have only one lot, but you shall have the hill country, and you shall clear it and possess it, and take care and use the lumber to build, but the valley of Jezreel is specified in here, and this tribe of Israelites didn't really take over that land at that point in time, and it's different scholars aren't sure, as I've done a little checking or looking at some stuff, and it says that valley of Jezreel may not have been completely conquered by the Israelites until the time of David, or maybe even Solomon, David's son. And so that's a ways down the road here yet. And there are many verses here that we're reading in Joshua that are talking about the distribution of the land that we will again hear in Judges. And it's different people have written the books, and they mirror each other a little bit, or they're like the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They all foretell the story of Jesus, and so here we're going to have a little bit different tellings of some of the histories, and they overlap, and they tell some of the same stories, especially of the distribution of the land here. So the people weren't completely confident in their abilities to take over the land, and with the valley of Jezreel, maybe they didn't need all that much land, that they didn't pursue taking it over. Who knows for sure why they would leave that for these people to continue to live there, but they evidently lived together somewhat of a peaceful relationship, because well, maybe I'm going to be wrong when we read further in, but it seems to me that they just kind of live together in not 100% harmony, but somewhat harmony. And you'll have to excuse me, I do have a cold. You know, it's one of these things, you know, as a guy, I should almost be home in bed, right? No. But so my voice is a little bit scratchy and my throat is a little bit sore, but we carry on. Yeah, so, but it just, and then chapter 18 again just continues talking about the distribution of the land between the other tribes. And we don't finish it in chapter 18 today either. Chapter 19 continues on with this giving of the other land. And in chapter 18 it talks about Shiloh. And Shiloh was a very important sanctuary in the time of Judges and Samuel, as we read on in there, and whether it really talks a lot about that or not, but it was one of the sanctuary cities, and it was an important place for a lot of people coming on. And it's about 20 miles north of the town of Jerusalem. So, I mean, you know, all of this distance wasn't, you know, hundreds of miles. I mean, Israel, by comparison to the United States, is very, very small. You look at the maps that they have of it, you know, and they'll show like on a whole page, but you know, the whole distance isn't so awfully great. And when you think about when Jesus was doing his ministry, he went as far north as Tyre and Sidon, and that was roughly 50 miles, you know, north of, you know, the Nazareth, Jerusalem, in that area. So, you know, this area of the world is a lot smaller. And I know that there have been people that have come from Europe to tour the United States, and they're amazed at how far it is from New York City to the Grand Canyon. You know, it isn't just a couple hours drive. You know, it's a long time to get from one place to the other. And so we have a large landmass compared to what the nation of Israel was and is even yet today. But it just continues with all of those things. And when it comes in chapter 18, it talks about there's still 7 tribes that haven't received their allotment of land. So Joshua sends a group of men out to survey this land, and to survey it within 7 blocks, you know, to get it so that they're evidently, you know, somewhat similar sized, somewhat similar with water and resources and farmland and pasture and grazing, so that each tribe is going to get, you know, kind of more or less an equal share of what is left out there to go with. And so in verse 8 it says, the men started on their way, and Joshua charged them to write a description of the land. You know, go throughout the land and write a description and come back to me, and then I will cast lots as to who gets what. And so again, it was, you know, they would have the 7 areas of land, and he'd say, okay, you are going to get lot 2, and or however they did that. But so it wasn't a real scientific method that way, but it was one of the ways to try to make it fair to all and impartial to all as well that way. So and it, you know, it talks about some of the towns that are in there and the towns that the different peoples get. And you know, verse 21 and 22, well, not 20, yeah, and I mean, there's such a list of towns in there. I mean, I start looking at those, and how do you even pronounce them? So I just kind of, yeah, but it's a bunch of towns. But it was a way to get the land divided and to get the people settled in the various areas of what was Israel, the promised land that God had promised to them. And so they just, the history is interesting. It takes a while for everything to develop and to get into shape. And I think about, you know, the history of the United States here, where the majority of us live. There have been people from outside of the United States that have tuned in once in a while, but The original 13 colonies over on the East Coast, wasn't a very large section of land. And when you look at that portion of the United States up there, Maine and New York and Vermont and Virginia, and, it's not very much of the country. And to think how the people came and settled and figured out the land masses and how the different states came to be states. And I think about North and South Dakota, there was conflict as to where the capital would be, and we should be Dakota, rather than North and South. And there are other county that could be that way too. And there are counties within North Dakota that there was fights between the towns as to who would be, the county seat or whatever. And so the distribution of land, the conquest of the land of Israel, was led by God on behalf of the people of God. And you and me, we are people of God. Thanks be to God.